1920s was the era of booming evolution from moving pictures and radios. Due to an excessive amount of wealth, people in the 1920s spoiled themselves with unnecessary goods and entertainment. In fact, movie productions became a huge business in the 1920s. Corporations included Warner Bros., Paramount, RKO, Metro Pictures, and 20th Century Fox. By the end of the decade, there were already about 20 film studios in and around Hollywood, and by 1926, there were more than 14,000 movie theaters throughout the U.S. This led to a boom or increase in the amount of goods being made and sold by American businesses. Celebrities arose because of the boom, so actors and actresses like Charlie Chaplin, John Barrymore, Douglas Fairbanks, Gloria Swanson, Janet Gaynor, and Norma Shearer became popular. Throughout the 1920s, most films were silent and didn't have color, and until 1923, they didn't even have synchronized soundtracks. Yet in 1916, a company named Technicolor came out, which included color and moving pictures using a 3-strip process, but it wasn't perfected until 1932. The Technicolor process perfected in 1932, and it had originally been used by a beam-splitting optical cube in a combination with the camera lens to expose 3 black and white films. The rise of Hollywood in the 1920s was due to the economic prosperity during the Roaring '20s era. People had more time to spend on leisure, and Americans fell in love with movies. The movies were a cheap form of entertainment, and Hollywood in the 1920s was a booming industry. The black and white silent movies progressed to color productions in the 1920s, and in 1927, the first talking picture was made. Movie stars such as Rudolph Valentino, Clara Bow, John Barrymore, Mary Astor, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and Greta Garbo were idolized by millions. By 1929, there were more than 25,000 cinemas, and an average of 100 million Americans went to the movies on a weekly basis.
The radio also played a big role in the 1920s because it showed families around the world a new way of entertainment. Then came a man named Guglielmo Marconi, who was given the most credit for creating the radio, even though there was others who had came before him in the late 1890s and early 1900s. After my boy Mr. Marconi was done creating the radio, it was now ready for public usage, which had KDKA, the first channel to ever take on the radio, was aired for the first time on November 2nd, 1920. Even though it was the first channel to be aired, not many people were able to hear it because people having radios at the time was very rare. After KDKA, radio stations across the country had started to blow up in 1922 with over 500 channels across the country and almost every family owning a radio or sharing a radio with another family. This set came with radio channels that had aired everything and anything you could think of, such as news broadcasts, weather reports, pop music, classical music, opera, sports, and even fictional programs, which fictional programs became the most popular thing during this time period. These radios have started coming in all shapes and different sizes, such as the smallest being at $8 and the largest being at $400, which now will be $3,000 in current money. This same year, 1922, had also had the first jazz broadcast. Radio had also changed the way that families would hang out by making them gather around the radio or hanging out with other families around the radio as well. Around 5 years later, the Federal Radio Act of 1922 led to creating the Federal Radio Commission to watch over the nation's radio stations.